A quick thing for those tech we don't know what we might use tin for. It's one of these really good metals. It's most important thing I think out of it. It's non-toxic. We used to use it in tin plate and stuff like that, but mainly now, we use it for electronics. So even though if your TV or whatever might not have an awful lot of solder in it, it's probably there's enough going around now that almost everything we use has some degree of tin in it. Over here in the UK, the weights we have on our car wheels for balance, they're all tin rather than lead, which they used to be. So yeah, there's a growing future for tin. The biggest problem is that the world isn't producing enough of it, and there aren't enough mines that are coming on stream to take over those that are going to eventually run out. Well, we're going to go through a little bit just at the beginning of this. Well, we'll go back to the beginning. We're going to talk a little bit this evening, or this morning if you're over in the UK, about the dewatering and what we call the shaft refurbishment project of South Crofty Mine. Because this is a presentation I've clobbered from somewhere else, we'll just start here. Why we might even want to do this. The irony of going green and people saying, well, there'll be less mining and everything. Actually, to go green in the way that people want, there's going to be more mining. There'll be certainly more mining of things like copper and lithium, and going with that, we can see there's a growing need or a growing market for tin. So at the moment, 70% of the mine production comes from sort of the Asia. So we in the UK historically have been a producer of tin, and Cornwall is the only major tin district in Europe, which is certainly good from our point of view. I think if I remember rightly in my history that they did find some tin in South Dakota, but one of the experts over here from the Thomas family who were mining at Dull Cove went over to have a look and then came back and said, well, Cornwall's got nothing to worry about. So, which was a good news from our point of view, but you never know. So why are we going to try and reopen and take a lot of water out of an old mine? Well, South Crofty was Europe's largest tin mine, and it was the last to close. And this picture on the screen is, I'm sure, something that you've seen before. It's taken in about 1895, looking from west to east. Strictly speaking, South Crofty as a mine is off to the left of the picture, and you're mainly looking at Cook's Kitchen and Tincroft mines. Gives you a good example of what an industrial mining landscape sort of looked like. And if you stand there today, it looks a lot greener, lot more tidy, and there's a lot less engine houses, unfortunately, and more of those nice big anonymous steel buildings. The mine closed in 98 because of low metal prices. It did not close because of a lack of resource. And in fact, there's quite a lot of metal left in the ground. We're lucky that much of the assets and the infrastructure remains from the previous operation. And although I joined, as many of you know, I joined the company in 2001, whose purpose was to try and raise money to reopen the mine, and we've been trying that for the last 20 odd years. We managed to raise some capital a couple of years ago, and we have started. So you're going to see some pictures you might recognize. The next one, I wasn't surprised when I saw this in the presentation. This is one of my 3D images. The mine we're dewatering is shown in the middle of the screen. It's the sort of the blue and purple color. The mines around it on either side are going to remain flooded after dewatering. So we hope to get back down there as quickly as we can. So in order to do that, we've got to build some water treatment and other infrastructure which isn't in place at the moment. We were lucky from an inheritance point of view that we inherited a number of deep shafts like Newcott's Kitchen and Rosgear and Taylor's, all of which were used previously for access and ventilation. While I've been working at the mine, we've increased the underground mining permissions area, which is shown on the map with a red boundary. We've basically took the original permissions area and doubled it, which gave us hopefully a bigger footprint to expand into as time progresses. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to convert the depths of the shafts into feet, but you're looking at 769 meters is sort of like 2,500 feet. The shafts are not that big by world standards. Rosgear, out of the five listed there, Rosgear was the last one to be sunk in 1925. Williams was sunk between 1895 and 1910. Newcott's Kitchen was sunk in 1907. Taylor's, again, about the same, maybe about the same time as Rosgear. But they're all fairly old, and nearly, in many cases, over 100 years old. So while I was in the States in May of 22, the company managed to secure 40.5 million sterling to A, dewater the mine, and B, produce a feasibility study for taking this dewatered mine and turning it into something that actually is going to produce. When I started back there were only 10 of us, and now there are I'd say there was nearly 80 of us. There seem to be lots of people doing stuff, which is good. We've been really busy in the construction of the water treatment plant, which is shown in the top right-hand corner. It's a bespoke plant. It contains 3 streams. I'll go through how they work in a minute. We've had to install some pumps in the shaft to get the water out, and to enable us to do some refurbishment, we've actually had to refurbish one of the winder houses, and we've purchased a nice shiny new winder, which is shown in the bottom right hand picture. We've only got one cage running, which requires the use of one sheave wheel on top of the head frame, and that winder will be moved at some stage in the future to another shaft to provide emergency egress, and a permanent larger winder will be installed. So we have been busy. How are we going to take the water out? This is the question that I've been asked on a number of occasions when, well, how are you going to do this? And the simplest method that we came up with, or the consultants that we use have come up with, is we have 2 pumps, large submersibles. They are, I think you might describe them as borehole pumps rather than anything else. They've been lowered nearly 360 meters down the shaft, and on top of them they have the 2 rising mains which come to surface, and that water then disappears off to the water treatment plant. So the idea is at the moment that these pumps will take the water from the mine and we will lower the water to what is shown on the drawing as the 195 fathom level. So if you can multiply 195 by 6, you'll get the idea in feet. At 195, there is historically a pump station which allegedly still has its pumps inside the pump station. And what we're going to do is take the water down to 195, get into the pump station, remove the old pumps that are in there, and then install some new ones which are now sitting on the surface waiting to go down. At that point, the pumps that are in the shaft at the moment will get lowered further down to the bottom, and then they will pump from the bottom of the mine to the pump station at 195, and then that water will then get pumped to surface. This should ensure that within 2 years we should have the mine completely dry. We've got the water at the moment at about the 148 fathom level. So we're between 120 and 140 on the diagram. The water level is being held there at the moment while we go through a process of shaft refurbishment, which I'll talk about a bit more in a while. Top left picture is one of the pumps. The actual pump is the left-hand end of that, and the right-hand side is mainly motor and cooling. So there are, I think, 6 stages in this borehole pump, and it can pump approximately, between them, they can pump 6.6 million US gallons a day. The photographs you see are of us installing the pumps into the shaft. And to do that, we built a special A-frame, which is in the middle of the middle photograph, which was installed. The pumps were suspended from this and then lowered through a specially constructed steel deck. And once the pump was lowered in, then the first column of the rising main was then bolted to the top of the pump, and gradually everything was slowly lowered down the shaft. It took about a month to lower each pump and its accompanying rising main to about 350 meters from surface. Each of the bolts on the flanges between the pump columns, I think, were torqued up to something like 1,500 Newton meters. I mean, we had a special gun for torquing these bolts up. I mean, was quite incredible, the figures that they had to do. And I think, if I remember rightly, I think there was something like 16 bolts per flange. So yeah, it took the guys a fair amount of time. The top right-hand picture shows we had a compressed air chain hoist, which was capable of holding 60 tons. So it was quite capable of suspending the pump and the rising main as we lowered it down the shafts. And that's, I think, one of our contractors taking off the strops after putting the pump in. Bottom right-hand picture just shows, I think, the pump gradually being lowered down from surface. Once all the rising main had been installed, we then had to put a special piece of rising main on the top of the shaft. That, on the left, shown in the left-hand photo, you've got the bottom of the pipe is mounted to the rising main in the shaft, and there's an elbow to take it through 90 degrees, and that sits on a sort of a bearing chair, so to speak, which is then was then welded to the top deck, so nothing could move. And we've got some of the jolly miners and one of who installed it. Never like having their photograph taken, I must add. Right hand picture shows the two finally installed pumps with their associated pipework from the across the surface. There's valves and flow meters and everything on there. The pumps are remotely controlled and are connected to the water treatment plant, so everything can be controlled remotely. The one thing you will see in the bottom right hand picture there, behind the two gentlemen, there is another compartment. So the shaft itself has 4 compartments. The two left hand ones, as you look at it, are for men and materials, and the 2 right hand ones were used for ore hoisting, and these are the 2 that contain the pump columns at the moment. Over a period of about 15 months, we took a site that was already being cleared back in 2018 for a water treatment plant that was never built. We physically didn't raise the capital to build it. So that money was already been spent and the site was prepared. So recently we then took that site, did a bit of rehabilitation. The plant by then had been redesigned, and it was quite a tight fit to fit it on the space that had already been created. What you can see here are 3 distinct streams, so they're called A, B, and C. They just allow us a bit of flexibility while we can vary the amount of water that we go through any of the parts of the plant. So in the bottom on the right hand photo, bottom left, the green building controls has all the electronics in it that controls the plant. We have the water comes in up here on the highest point and is aerated. It then goes through some thickeners and various stages of chemical addition, and the clean water then comes out bottom right, and all the sort of heavy sludge that we collect, which contains all the heavy metals that we are settling out, then gets collected in the 2 tanks down the bottom. The process is fairly straightforward. The first thing you do is degas everything. That takes out all the air that's trapped in the water. It gets rid of the radon that may be there as well. Any noxious gases that may have been trapped in the water as the mine flooded. We add a peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is introduced, and that starts to precipitate some of the arsenic and manganese out. We add a flocculant to bind the iron together to make this sludge. In the first clarifier, we add lime in the third set of tanks, which raises the pH from about 6.5, 7 to nearly 10. That causes the manganese and everything else to drop out. We then pass that water into a secondary clarifier, which cleans the rest up. And finally, the clean water will go at pH of about 10, goes into the tanks labeled 5. At that point, we add carbon dioxide to the system to acidify it, and that then drops the pH from about 10 to nearly between 6 and 7, which then is discharged. it's had a quite a major effect already on the local stream which this water is discharged in. The water used to be quite an orange colour due to the pollution from old abandoned mines. Now we're pumping, say, about 6.6 million US gallons of clean water into the river. It's actually done it quite noticeably. It's cleaner, which is good from a visual point of view. What it has done is it's raised the water level in the river by about 4 inches. Most of the time, that is not a problem. If we have periods of extremely heavy rain, then there is a danger that the river can flood. So, in circumstances like that, we reduce our pumping. We've agreed to not flood the river. So, as we're adding water to it from a sort of man-made source rather than a natural source, then it is up to us to reduce the amount of water that we discharge. We have the water from the plant is discharged into one of the adit systems that we've got, and that then makes its way down to the river, so we don't have to pump it or pipe it. The water falls approximately 160 feet from the water treatment plant to the adit discharge level. So it was decided that we could install a set of turbines underground, and these take the discharge water and help to offset the amount of electricity it takes to run the plant. I think we're generating about a quarter of the total consumption for the water treatment plant by a sort of renewable means, which gives us some brownie points when it comes to being green. We've got a license to pump at 25,000 cubic meters a day, which I looked up earlier is about 6.6 million US gallons. Most of the plant was constructed locally, which was really good. We've engaged with a number of companies locally that were only too happy to be involved. It certainly helped. Luckily, the electricity prices had dropped slightly before we started pumping, because at one stage we had really high electric costs over here, and it certainly upset people's calculations for how much it was going to cost to run all this plant. There is an estimate, I would say, and it is an estimate at the moment of about, I'm not sure it's 300 miles. I'd say it's just over 100, but that's a surveyor telling you, not management. And there is in the region of about 8 to maybe 9 million cubic meters of void space, which is currently flooded. While I can with a calculator here, I can do this as volume. Let's work out what that is in cubic feet. Right. As you like large numbers in the States, 8 million cubic meters is approximately, say, 300 million cubic feet of space. So there's quite a lot of voidage down there, and most of it is in the deeper levels. I've been through, as my job as surveyor, I've been through quite a lot of the old historical sections, and I'm in the process of trying to calculate a volume so we can check how much water we think we've taken out. The big problem we did have, although we started pumping beginning of November last year, the biggest problem we had was we had the wettest autumn and winter in Cornwall for about 15 years. So at one stage, I would say about a third of the water that we were actually pumping out of the mine was purely rainfall. Something I've not spoken of um, is that the water is warm. The water coming out, the water at the bottom of the mine is about 25 degrees Celsius. And even then, when it goes through the water treatment plant, it's still nearly sort of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It is quite warm. On a good chilly winter's day, it is quite pleasant standing up there on top of the plant with your hand on some of the pipe work and stuff because it is actually nice and warm. So we're investigating the use of the mine water to heat offices and workshops. So we'll take some of the heat that's contained within the water, which is generated geothermally, and see what we can do with it. Coupled with the dewatering, we are refurbishing the main access shaft to make it more useful for us. The shaft is, as I mentioned earlier, split into 4 compartments. Originally, it was 3 compartments, one of which contained the pump rods for the beam engine, which was installed in up until 1950 when they were replaced by electric pumps. The shaft originally contained 4 compartments, all of which were timber. In the mid 1980s, the 2 eastern compartments were refurbished with steel work and steel guides and everything, and that's the ones we have put the pumps down. The timber compartments on the west side or the left-hand side of your drawing are in the process of being stripped out and replaced with steel. This was always on the cards for the mine back in the 1980s. They had a plan to do it then. However, with the collapse of the tin price and the mine really going on to sort of like a bit hand to mouth existence for quite a while, meant that they just physically couldn't afford the cost and the time to take the shaft out of commission while this work was done. So we are not doing anything that hasn't been thought of before. This is just carrying out a plan that was already in the pipeline. By taking the 2 compartments and turning them into one large one, it means we can have a larger cage. We can get more people underground at one time. It also frees up the space. So if we need to take larger pieces of equipment underground, they don't have to be cut up into small pieces to fit down the existing compartments. They can go in. There's more likelihood of them fitting in the one big compartment. In order to do this, we've had to take the sheave wheels off the top of the head frame. The top deck itself had to be removed and strengthened and had quite a lot of steelwork replaced. It'd been there since the 1970s and in a very strong southwesterly wind with a lot of salt in the air, the steelwork had got quite a lot of corrosion. There was quite a lot of work that needed doing to the sheave wheels, so it effectively we took the existing sheave wheels off and had a new one uh, built for the purpose. In the middle picture, you can see a crane taking the old sheave wheels off, and you can see the nice grey rising main columns before they were installed into the shaft. I don't envy the gentleman who did all the welding on those because I think we were told it was done by possibly 1 or 2 people. And I think there's something like there's a couple of hundred columns, or they were before they were installed. All the crane hire that we use came from a company, Max Salvers. They're based about a quarter of a mile down the road. The gents were only too happy to come on site and assist us in our work. Right hand picture shows people working from a man basket while they sort of did some NDT testing of the head frame. As I said, we took the top deck off. It sat on the ground for quite a while all the old steelwork was cut out and new steelwork was welded in. Because we were moving one of the sheave wheel positions slightly, some of the support work had to be changed. But it was easier to do this with this structure on the deck than try and do it on top of a 150-foot head frame. And then we had the grand day when new sheave wheel was put on the top, and I was there. Luckily, the weather was good, so I could fly my drone, which is what the right-hand picture is, bottom right picture I took of people installing the new fabricated steel wheel, sheave wheel. The South Winder building had been neglected more or less for the whole time I'd been working for the company. It did have a big electric winder which was there when the mine closed. That winder unfortunately could not be used again. And so one of the first major jobs was actually getting the thing out. We did offer a number of heritage people the chance to have a complete electric winder for display. Unfortunately, I think the job of taking it out and then moving it and rebuilding it was probably beyond most of the local heritage groups. So sadly, at the moment, as far as I know, the winder is sitting in pieces at the top end of the site awaiting a future. Once the winder was out of the winder house, we could get in, clear all the pits of oil and all the other debris that had accumulated, and then we could start thinking about making the building safe and refurbishing the steel structure so we could use it again. So over time, some new bases were cast inside the building. The whole of the steel frame was shot blasted and repainted. And the photos here you can see show work in progress. I must say, now it's all nicely clad with nice new grey cladding. It does look a lot better than the old rusty structure, as it should.
Keith, you've got 5 minutes.
Right, well, we're rattling on. New winder installed. It's a CMAG Tech Bird one, which is a German US installation. It's only a single drum with a single rope on it, all computer controlled. Nice and warm inside there. The winder drivers have really made that house their home. A few dimensions, a few pictures of it being installed. We've had to put an emergency winder. You can't go underground in the UK with one winder, so we've had to put a second one in, a smaller one, purely for emergency purposes. And we have a yellow 2-deck cylindrical cage we call the Bullet. Actually, I think the guys have nicknamed it the Suicide Sausage, which is a bit more unpleasant, but there we go. And that goes in one of the compartments. We've got the main cage for access goes in here. We have a vent duct to go in there, and this diagram shows the final configuration with the new steelwork and then installed. So 2 pumps, main cage, ventilation, and our emergency egress. Shot on the left, looking up the shaft, what was a typical Cornish timbered shaft, and the photo on the right shows the guys busily at work removing the original timber lining and installing the new steelwork. One of my jobs is to ensure with others that the new steelwork not only gets installed in the correct location, it's all lined up properly. So we have lasers in the shaft to ensure that the guides, when they get installed, are correctly placed. Two shots of the 2 cages. The round one is our emergency escape, the Bullet, and the one on the right, the more traditional rectangular 2-deck cage for access. We have a working platform in the shaft suspended on chains, which the guys use to remove the timber and install the buntons and everything from. Picture on the right shows it making its way into the shaft. It looks like there's quite a lot of room on it when you see it there, but actually when it's now in the shaft and you're down on it, there isn't really a lot of room at all. Picture of the sinking stage, passing our first level, and then you can see the cage suspended on its chains in the shaft going down. I mentioned about the pump station being refurbished, and these are some of the pumps sitting on their frames ready to go down. As this is a corporate sort of thing, I'm going to say the final images here are more for those who like how much material we've got to mine and how long, sort of grade. So we've got a reasonable grade. I think it's about the 3rd highest resource grade of any of the 10 deposits now under consideration. And they reckon there's quite an amount of tin there, so that gives you the value and why we're doing it. We're hoping to sort of, once the water goes out, then looking at sort of 500,000 tons a year, about 1% mined grade. You know, we should make some money. The good news is it's improving the quality of what was the Red River, and it was red because of the amount of iron that was pumped into it from all the mines around here. So we're going to have a fairly low impact from that point of view. There's probably a lot more hydro that we can generate once we're underground. We're certainly going to do something with the heat. People are looking into that at the moment. I think we're going to have, it will be diesel powered equipment to start with, but I think long term we might well go to electric. So that would certainly improve conditions underground. All mines, as far as I'm aware, have a positive when they're working and productive, have a benefit to the local community. So there's some big numbers there, which have got to be good in an area like Cornwall. that's not got any other major industry really. And finally, we'll close with another aerial shot of the head frame, the newly refurbished south winder on the right, the little what we call the west winder in its small shed in front of the in front of the cherry picker. And that was taken on the day when we finally managed to hoist the Cornish flag up onto the flagpole and get it flying. So we do have a Cornish flag flying over our head frame most of the time. All right, thank you for listening. Any questions? Let me know.
Thank you very much, Keith. Questions, comments?
Keith, can I ask one question on that last slide?
You can.
If you can put that back up, is the Heartlands development just behind and toward the rear of that picture?
That is it. If I don't know if you can see my mouse, yeah, that's Heartlands over there. Unfortunately, having spent 35 million on it, the council then pulled the plug earlier this year. They somewhere along their lines, their business plan didn't generate enough income, and they just found they couldn't. It was not sustainable to keep it going. So at the moment, the building, everything is shut over there. The good news is that when the mine closed in '98, and that's Robinson's Shaft complex, that having spent all this money on a heritage site, they've actually protected all the buildings. So the engine house and some of the other mining structures are in a better state now than they were back then, which is good. They're still looking for ways to try and reopen it, but I don't know. We'll see.
Did they refurbish the beam engine over here at the Robinson Shaft?
Uh,
I thought that was in the cards originally, but
it was in the cards. As far as I know, it's still more or less in the same state it was when it was put into sort of like storage in 1955. So you could go round the engine house and see it, but I think all the metalwork inside was still covered in grease. So it didn't. They weren't quite sure. I think the powers that be how to get it to potentially operate. It would be nice to do it under steam, but I think the law regarding the use of high pressure steam to run anything is quite difficult. So it probably would have been done on compressed air, or it could have been electrically powered in some fashion. But as far as I know, nothing. There's no plan to do anything with it at the moment, apart from just sort of keep a watching brief.
So Keith, you do all this surveying and projecting and things like that. If most of the volume of the water in the mine is deeper, how can you predict at how many meters per day or week or whatever the water level is going to drop in the shaft? So it's going to drop slower faster, and then it's going to slow down if you keep running into more water and you're pumping at a constant rate, right?
Yeah, that is correct. At the moment, some days we were dropping to 2.5 meters a day. And then when we approached one of the levels, and you began to see that the effect of some of the stoping of East Pool and North Tincroft mines, which both drain into the lower workings of South Crofty, yeah, you could see that the water level did slow down. It is planned that as we get deeper, the water level may drop, maybe half a meter a day, half a meter to a meter a day, depending. That's also dependent, I think, on how much rainfall we have as well.
Right.
Because we saw from the figures that you could be pumping about a third of the water we were pumping was potentially just what was flowing in, what was falling out of the sky and getting underground. So if we have a drier, once we get back into full pumping regime, then if it stays fairly dry, I think we might drop the water fairly quickly to get to 195. The bigger volumes are definitely below that, between there and the bottom. So I think the second half of pumping will be slower. I'm still trying to get a definitive set of sections for some of the stoping we got, and then try and get some better idea of the volumes that we're trying to pump.
So in a couple of years, when we go back to Cornwall, you'll be able to give us a tour, right?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think we might be able. Yeah, well, we will see. They say that there's a lot of work, and a lot of the mining is one of, to quote one of your politicians, we have some known knowns, we have some known unknowns, and there definitely are some unknown unknowns to go in this. Mining is never straightforward, and there's always something that's going to crop up that requires a solution. Yeah, I'm hoping that the crews are now getting the hang of installing the steel work. They're getting the hang of doing that side of the refurbishment. That the plans, technical plans are there. It's just now doing the work and raising a bit more. The second stage of the finance to actually construct the processing plant and get all that side in place. So yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of people now that have got a drive to what we're doing. There's a lot of people outside the fence who are seeing that things are happening. So it's all good. It's all good.
That last picture that you had up off to the left, it looked like you still had two older buildings, original buildings.
Yeah, the original, this one on the right is the South Winder, and
Right.
the one under this with this sort of more modern roof is covering what was the North Winder. So we had a winder in there winding over the lower sheave wheels, and the South Winder went over the higher ones. These two buildings here,
Yeah.
that's the compressor house, and it did have three large compressors in it. I think one's still in there. This one did have the backup generator in it at one stage. It's now, I'm not quite sure. It's still got a load of electrical substation, electrical switchgear in it. So yeah, they are. That is a fairly modern building. I'd say from the 50s. This is certainly from 1907.
Okay. Are there plans for those buildings? Are they going to remain, or?
They are going to remain, and I think they may well get. I don't know exactly what they're going to be used for. We will have a set of compressors on site at somewhere. We might end up putting them back in the compressor house, or they might decide to put them somewhere else. We have behind there with the blue with the white roof is the mine dry. That's where we all change at the moment. And the new building over here contains all the electrical switchgear for running the pumps. It has to have air conditioning, that building now, because the pump drives, the electrical drives for the pumps. Actually, the pumps are rated at nearly a megawatt each. And so this building here, yeah, the electrical switchgear in here generates quite a lot of heat. And on a good day when it's cold, it's quite a nice building to go and stand next to.
Okay. Anything else? Well, thank you very much, Keith.
No problem.
Yep. Thanks. Good to see everybody again.